His presentation is entitled The New Economic Order, Lessons from the Global Financial Crisis. The floor is yours for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you first of all for the invitation. And before I proceed to more serious and topics of major concern, I will start from a joke. And it says a survey was conducted by the United Nations, and the only question was the following: please give your most honest opinion about the solution of the food shortage in the rest of the world. And it was a complete failure. Guess why? In some parts of the world, people didn't know what the words or the terms please or most honest means. In eastern part of the world, post-Soviet countries, some didn't know what opinion means. In Middle East, they didn't know what solution means. In Africa, where people starve, they didn't know what food means. In European Union, in America, in Japan, they didn't know what shortage means. And the last part, in the United States of America, they didn't know what the rest of the world means. Now let me proceed to more serious things. I'm sorry that we don't have Mr. Popov here, who said that the basis of the free market economy is there. I'm happy you're here. I have an opponent, at least. You mentioned that the foundations remain the same. It's too early to say that, or it's exaggeration to say that the West is dead, or the capitalist economy. You talked about financial system and the changes, the trends, didn't touch upon the basis. To me, it's a crisis of trust, crisis of moral, systemic crisis, of course, crisis of responsibility, but most importantly, that's a crisis of ideology. Now, I want to have more opponents, not only Dr. Popov, to convince me that there is one single nation, if not more, in the world that still have a pure market economy, that have the ideology that we call liberal or neoliberal. To me, there is no more country, at least after the crisis. I'm not going to prove the points, because it's obvious it's not only a financial crisis, or it wasn't a financial crisis, it's a systemic crisis. It was, and it is still, a crisis of responsibility, because it seems many structures, companies, international structures, take their part of responsibility, and they are very accurate in those tasks. But in general, no one cares about general responsibility, what's happening in the world and to the humanity. And the lack of trust toward the governments, from people to people, international structures to one another, nations, this is also important to mention. Now, the new economic order, before talking about it, can the system will be repaired by the old methods? The things that are still on the agenda, and many international structures still try to repair the former system, not talking about the new economic order that is already on the agenda. It's not a call by the developing countries as it was before, because it's equally important both for developing and developed nations to restructure the existing order. And the role of international organizations is very important. Now what's happening, we may also call not only in disorder, but also economic terror. The poverty, food security, food crisis, deindustrialization, urbanization, and I want to stop on 1996 Rome summit. Heads of the governments, heads of the states were committed to reduce the poverty by half by the year 2015. We're approaching the year 2015. And instead of diminishing the number or reducing the number of impoverishment, the people around the world, the poverty level is going up. Just the opposite is true. And we need to discover the roots, why it's happening. The Millennium Development Goals start from reducing the poverty. What we can do about the poverty with the old system. Shall we change it or shall we stay with the same order? And what is very important, in none of the post-Soviet countries, international structures like IMF and World Bank can talk about success stories. Most of them are failures. Banks, other lending institutions, I thank to the previous speakers who covered most of the topics related to the financial system. But I will talk about state subsidies, dumping, industrial targeting. Subsidies and equal conditions for competition. Subsidies and taxpayers' money. Subsidies and equal distribution of income. Subsidies and government expenditures. Subsidies and fair trade. I want to pay your attention on the fact that fair trade is not always, free trade is not always a fair trade. And that's one of the global economic paradoxes we face today. And while there is an evidence of a decline in social costs, there also is an increase in the amounts of subsidies. Subsidy allotment for a single cow equals the average annual income of a farmer in rural Russia. And $350 billion are being spent annually to subsidize the agriculture in EU. That's around 41 million cows having an opportunity, in other words, to fly business class 1.5 times around the world. The financial sector, I will skip this part. And today, developing countries are highly dependent on developed nations. These are some figures that we need to consider. Also, Europe, Japan, and the United States account for nearly 4/5 of the world's demand for consumer electronic goods. They also consume the same share of computers and 2/3 of the machine tools produced in the world. China, Russia, India, Israel, and the Philippines offer large pools of skilled people at labor rates much lower than in Europe or in the United States. In addition, today changes are occurring more frequently, more rapidly, and have a more severe impact. And the shocks in one market quickly translate into rapid shifts in others and easily overshadow the financial resources of some governments. The past has lost most of its value as a predictor of the future. As one of the speakers the first day mentioned, many nations that have been considered enemies for centuries suddenly become close allies and offer wealth of business opportunities in accordance with the changes brought by new economic order. I will skip these slides and, of course, the scenarios for the future. First, confrontation. Second, isolation. And the third, cooperation. What are the solutions? Before talking about solutions, we need to consider the lessons from the financial crisis. And let's go briefly over those lessons. The economy should be allowed to grow not through artificial inducements, but on its own with less dependence on balloon-like financial markets. And one of the most important things I want to emphasize is to strengthen public-private partnership, move from reactive to proactive economic policies. and work out variety of different models and scenarios for the future development. Alternatives, to start from innovations not only in technologies but also in mentality, turn the free trade into a fair trade and fair competition, turn this new network of people into global family, close the secret societies and open up a global village, translate the economic growth into human development, which is not taking place today. And I want to share with one of the proverbs, Armenian proverbs, that give freedom to your thoughts, logic to your speech, order to your actions. And before I finish the last message, the world we live, where we live, is not inherited from our parents. It's a strange sentence. We had borrowed it from our children, and before leaving this world, we need to return it back to them and ask ourselves, is it safe, prospering, or not? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Manasserian, for your presentation and for sticking to the 10 minutes. Can I invite questions or comments? Yes, please, the gentleman there in the middle. If you introduce yourself, please.
My name is Shiv Talwar, and I'm from Canada, an organization called Spiritual Heritage Education Network. And my question to you, sir, is what kind of initiatives have you got in mind or would you suggest for human development? Thank you.
Shall I proceed?
Please.
Thank you very much. And as people say, it's a $1 million worth question. But I'll try to answer to that question by saying that one of the lessons of the crisis is that the profits cannot be the only goal for the business or for the business community. If the social element, socium by itself, the human being, the individual, is being ignored, we'll face crises, even severe ones than this one. I believe that one of the keys to solve the issues we face today is the creation of models, national models, not just one, because some international structures monopolized the models and they pushed them for at least 20 years to post-Soviet countries, that none of them had been realized or none of them has a success. My belief is the social market economy, where we have the human being, the individual, in the center of economic reforms, and only then we may count or we can translate the economic growth into human development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Manasserian. Thank you.